Greg Musselman is Vice President of Media and Domestic Ministry for Voice of the Martyrs Canada. It's an organization which advocates for and helps those suffering persecution for their Christian faith. Greg, thanks for joining us from beautiful, warm Edmonton.
Well, it's good to be with you again, Cheryl, from where I live here in, as you say, beautiful Edmonton, Alberta. Yeah.
Well, and today we're talking about a country which is one of the worst in the world for persecution, at least according to the headlines, what we're hearing, which is Nigeria, being terrorized in the north by Boko Haram, which wants to establish an Islamic state there. Tell me a little bit about this terror group.
Well, Boko Haram is a group that haven't really been around that long, and they found a weakness within the government. The government there is... There's just a lot of corruption, as you know, in Nigeria, and the government was not clamping down on terrorism, so they were able to build up and turn the northern part, at least some of the areas, into more of a radical Islamic state. There has been Sharia law in most of the states in the north for many years, but these guys are taking advantage again of a weak government, and they're also a group that is against, as they call, Western education. That's what Boko Haram loosely means. So their idea is to have a caliphate, is to turn northern Nigeria into an Islamic state that is under strict Sharia law, meaning a very strict interpretation of the Quran. And they're not only killing Christians, and they're doing that, they're burning churches down, they're doing horrible things, but they're basically killing anybody that gets in their way, and that includes other Muslims.
It seems really indiscriminate, Some people think that up to 10,000 people have just been killed there in the last year. And I mean, we're hearing stories like 16-year-old girls wearing a bombing vest, basically, underneath their clothes because they can hide them, and blowing themselves up. 16-year-old girls blowing themselves up in a market. So who's the target of that? Is it the government?
Yeah, in many of those cases, it is the government. They will go into, these young girls are going in with, with the burqas on, hiding the explosives, going into the market where there are a lot of people. And in some of the cases you've read in the news, one of the girls will go in, blow herself up, and again, it's targeting anybody that doesn't go along with their ideology. And so whether it's Christian or Muslim, or in some cases where there's bombs going off of police stations or government buildings, I mean, their goal is to cause mayhem, and they're doing that in a lot of ways, and they're using these young girls. And there has been some speculation that maybe some of these young girls were a part of the group that were, girls that were kidnapped from the Chibok area in northern Nigeria, Christian girls for the most part. There's no confirmation on that, but certainly they're using indoctrination. Some of these girls are doing this willingly. We did hear a story, though. There was one girl, her and her friend, went to blow up, some areas at a market, and after she saw the first explosion, she tried to run, and obviously they had it set by remote, those that were controlling these girls, and blew her up as well. Oh. I mean, they're just using the most brutal tactics. It is, our minds just go, it can't get more evil than that, when they're using young girls to kill their own countrymen, and in many cases, people of their own religion, Islam.
Yeah, and it's funny because everyone always thought for the longest time that they were aligned with Al-Qaeda, and then just recently they declared their loyalty to ISIS. And there's a similarity there just in the brutality that we're seeing.
Well, I guess when you think that groups like, Al-Qaeda, who, they blew up the trade towers in New York City and all the horrible things that they did under Osama bin Laden, that, boy, these guys are pretty evil. But then even with ISIS coming along and Al-Qaeda saying even those guys are too violent, because again, they're targeting, people of the Muslim faith. And as a result of that, there has been this division. And now Boko Haram want to, give allegiance to ISIS. And, people that are experts on this, certainly more than I would be, but they're saying this is, in a way, is a public relations, from Boko Haram. But then ISIS likes that, the Islamic State in, in Iraq, Syria, and the other places they're trying to get into, is to create the illusion anyway that it's a global terrorism. Yeah. But in some ways it is, even though it may be very small in numbers when you compare the vastness, of the Muslim religion. But I mean, these guys are being so brutal and so destructive that, as I say, even with a group like Al-Qaeda saying even that's gone too far from where we understand it to be.
I know. And the thing is, when we talk about these things and you talk about 10,000 people killed, or recently there was an attack in the town of Baga, they think up to 2,000 people were killed. And we have pictures actually of the town before and after. No one's been able to get in there because it's controlled by Boko Haram, and to really verify what happened there. But we know that something terrible did. So you can talk about all those numbers, absolutely, but people get lost in that, And so one of the stories that you covered that really touched my heart was you went to an orphanage where kids have lost one or both of their parents through attacks by these terrorists. And you talked to James and Elisha Sunday about losing 7 of their family members. Tell me a little bit about them.
Yeah, well, the orphanages you're referring to is in Ogun State, which is in the southern part of Nigeria. And again, you think of the north as mostly Muslim, and of course there are Christians up there, and churches are being attacked. In the south, it's mostly Christian and some Muslims. And then the central part of the country, you've got Plateau State, which in many ways is a staging area for a lot of the evangelism that's taking place in the north. And again, you have to remember that many people are coming to Jesus Christ, leaving the Muslim faith, and as a result of that, that is causing a reaction from groups like the Boko Haram. They feel that they're losing control. So you've got people like James and Elisha who were in a place called Dogo no Hawa, which is near Jos, kind of like a suburb or a village. And it was a village that was there was peace between the Muslims and the Christians. But in March of 2010, Boko Haram went in there and with villagers from that village and attacked it. And what the sad part is that, again, they were living in peace. When the Muslims couldn't convert the Christians, they left but said, we will come back. And they did, and hundreds went in. They were shooting and killing people. And Elisha and James Sunday, they lost 5 brothers and their parents. They did also have a sister that survived, but they almost were killed themselves. The video shows James got hit in the head with a machete. He was also burned. His brother was also injured badly. Thought he would die, and so putting a personal face on on what's happening here. And I know when these things happen and I hear the stories, I think of people like James and Elisha and Sarah and all the other young folks that we have met at the orphanage, because it's not just, again, thousands and thousands of numbers, and those numbers are mind-boggling to think that many Christians have been killed, but it's real people. Now, these young boys will grow up without parents.
Yeah, exactly. And what really touched me about that story was James talking about how he wanted to go right away and get revenge. And that's all he was thinking about, was bring vengeance on them because of his parents, and how his pastor kind of walked him through, as a Christian, you have to forgive. God is the one who will judge, and you have to leave that up to him. And he actually did accomplish that, which I think is totally mind-boggling. Just their bravery and their courage and their faithfulness to, following Jesus is amazing. Greg, we appreciate what you do so much, and thank you so much, because you go into these situations, you have your heart broken over and over again so that you can raise awareness and tell us these stories, because we need to pray. And so
absolutely,
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl,
so
and I appreciate it. Yeah.
And if you're watching this interview and your heart's been touched and you want to do something to make a difference for persecuted Christians, the number one thing you can do is pray, because they need to know that they're not alone. They're part of our family. They're our brothers and sisters. And so, we do these interviews and we raise this awareness basically so that we can ask you to pray, because we know then that God listens and he makes a difference.